Nothing but the size that's great
So
about
he's
it.
writing he's on his own. He's retired finally at 63. He's on he's wanted to come to Indian country his whole life, for whatever reason I don't know.
Neither do I,
Because
actually.
people get us all mixed up
And
with
he's
them.
he's on an
With
odyssey.
you.
He started out in Oklahoma and checked out a bunch of tribes there, and he's moving his way up. And I said, this is so different because this is an intact Native community. And he's just you got a war memorial. You got oh my.
I never realized how many Native Americans were actually involved in all the different wars. I thought it was just a handful. You know, I mean, you hear about the code talkers. That's about it.
Oh, yeah.
Nothing more.
Yeah.
Well, we
All
had,
right.
here's the thing,
Phenomenal.
you only hear about Navajo code
Yeah,
talkers
yeah.
to make it worse.
Yeah.
I interviewed a guy 15 years ago named Grover
Mhm.
Wolfguts.
Right. That's right.
Mhm.
That's
And he was a code talker. We had,
Right.
a lot of tribes had code talkers.
right.
But the Navajo seemed
You
to
know,
have
that's something I discovered on this trip after all these years.
Yeah.
Is that you only hear about the Navajo.
Right.
You never hear
So what was I talking about now? I
but
forgot.
the genealogy, I think. You know, it's
Was it?
your grandmother? Your grandmother?
Oh, my mom.
Your mom?
So anyway, so one day she's sitting in front of the TV and I'm going to feed her lunch or something and she starts crying. And I said, well, what's the matter, Mom? And she said, she said, I'm just crying because I never got anything for Christmas. And I said, what do you mean you never got anything for Christmas? She said, well, okay, so OCS is over in Pine Ridge, and she was from over by Martin, okay? And so my grandmother, her mother had rheumatoid arthritis, crippling arthritis, and so she more or less needed, they were very poor. Everything went to the doctor then, you know. So anyway, so my mother didn't get to go home for Christmas. And so she's sitting there crying, you know, because she said, we didn't get to go home for Christmas. We had to stay for Christmas. And she said, all I got was a little rag doll. And she was crying, you know. And I said, oh, Mom, you know. She said, it was when they come after us in the big trucks and they just drop us off. And then if they could afford to come after us in the spring, you know.
And yet the boarding school was not very far away, right?
Well, a long time ago in
40, 50 miles by
1900.
wagon.
Yeah. But they couldn't.
Well,
go-
that would be an overnight trip even by wagon,
Wow.
you know. And she had a aunt who lived in Manderson. So when my grandma got sick, she would come in her team and wagon, Nancy American Horse. Did you ever hear her? Her
Yeah,
and
oh
Robert?
yeah, she's famous actually.
Oh yeah, she's a very famous woman.
yeah.
Well, she was my mom's babysitter, you know. So
Okay.
they would. I don't know how they got the message to Manderson, you know, from over by Martin, and they'd get the message to her. She would come in her team and wagon all by herself, and it would take her 2 days to get over there.
Oh my goodness. 2 days from
Mhm.
Manderson to Martin?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
because you can figure you're only doing like 16 miles an hour on a good road with horses, you know.
If you're even doing that, actually.
Yeah, and anyway, so she and Mom said, you know, she said she when she came, she always brought big gunny sack fulls of dried horse meat because she raised horses, you know, and so she would dry this horse meat. So my mom was more or less raised on horse meat or whatever, you know, people could shoot for the day or whatever, and so anyway, so she said Aunt Nancy was coming to watch us, and she said she said, oh, I was sleeping under the wagon last night, and she said this big snake crawled over me.
Oh my God.
And I thought, oh my God, she was a brave woman. I would have had a heart attack and died right there, you know.
You know, Tilda, you'll meet her tonight, the only toy that she got in her entire childhood, the only toy she ever got, she got a paper doll once. That's the
Yeah,
only-
people were poor.
Yeah, I
you
mean,
know,
if you got an
really,
orange for
really
Christmas,
poor.
or you got an apple, or you got a bag full of like hard nuts or candy, a bag of
Yeah.
little candy, that's what your Christmas was.
Let me ask you a difficult question.
Sure.
I mean, you know, your people, I mean, the Lakota were really sort of the lords of the plains in their heyday. They were
Well,
an
thank you.
amazing thing,
Yeah.
right? And how do you feel about all that's gone through all, after all these years? I mean, are you completely reconciled and are now American first and Lakota second, or the other way around?
Well,
I told you it's a
most
difficult
people
one.
think I'm white or Italian or something. They don't think that I'm Lakota. That's for sure. But I was raised in boarding school. You know,
Right.
but I was raised in a girls' school. Now my parents had cars. They came and picked me up at Christmas time and took me home. You know, and I went home every summer. But I think that going back to the boarding school and people laughing, that was how they got through this big ordeal from being lords of the plains to being a subservient, conquered peoples, you know? Because that's what my dad used to tell me. My dad would say, remember, always remember, we're a conquered people, you know? But that doesn't mean you have to stay conquered. Now, he was 55 when he got killed in a freeway accident in LA. But he became after he graduated from OCS, he became a quality control inspector. So he ended up working for the government as a meat inspector. He was the only Native American who was a meat inspector. He also they were doing a magazine article on him at the time that he died, but I called him a spy, you know, well, because this is what he did. So say that in Hershey, Pennsylvania, and they have a big, is it Hershey's or ketchup or something there in Hershey, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, it's Hershey's.
And so they would send him over there, and then he would work there, but he would observe. Because if they thought they had somebody on the take, then they would send him. So he traveled all over to Georgia, to Washington State, wherever they had food plants, and that's what he did. He stayed there until he found out who the man or woman was that was on the take. Okay, so he gets killed in this car accident. And right away, I'm getting phone calls because I'm the eldest in my family, so everything was, dumped on me. My mom is prostrate over here, and I can't do anything, And my brothers and sisters are all looking at me, well, you do something, And of course, we all lived all over the place. My two brothers were living in Spokane then. My sister was going to school at UC Davis. And I lived in Fresno, and I was working for the California Rural Indian Health Board then as their nurse. And anyway, so my father gets killed. I go down there. Immediately, I'm getting phone calls from the government saying, we need the key. And I said, well, we're going to be flying back to South Dakota. You can call me when I get back. And have you found the key? Well, I said, I didn't know what in the world kind of key they wanted. And so when I came back, then I don't know if you've ever heard of, what was his name, Noguchi? Yeah. The really famous
sculptor?
No. He was the Los Angeles coroner.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah. He did Marilyn Monroe and so, yeah. So I had to go to his office because they had all my dad's effects from, his wallet and car keys and whatever. Well, his car, now I don't mean to get a little graphic here, but his car was just absolutely totaled because it was a semi that came through the center divider and just crashed into them.